Good morning, everybody. And my wife uses the very moment I go live to get ice out of the ice maker. Her timing is impeccable. So glad to have you here today and share a few great articles from today's Wall Street Journal. First article is Tesla is asking customers for more money. And I actually like this. So they've got a new option now for their older cars, $2,500. By the way, Tesla options are pretty pricey. Many of their options are what some of us used to spend on cars. But they've really got a new option that upgrades some of their electronics, and it gives you a more sensitive touchscreen, a better touchscreen. I don't know if it's a physical swap out or not. I'm still having trouble understanding that. It gives you video streaming and arcade games, but it took away AM, FM, and Sirius XM. But by the way, they've now fixed that. So for additional $500, I'd get you up to $3,000. You can get those back, AM, FM, and Sirius XM. So it's basically a satellite option with some improvements on the touchscreen. And again, they've sold you a $75,000, $80,000, maybe $100,000 car, and they've come back to you and said, we have an opportunity for you. And so you don't have to trade in your car or anything. You can just tell them you want an upgrade and pay for them with your Tesla account, and they take care of it. I don't know if this one's all electronic. Most of the Tesla upgrades, actually all the ones that they offer after you buy the car have been software upgradable. So they do it remotely. And to me, this is brilliant because most auto companies sell you the car, and the only thing they can hope for in annuity income is that you'll bring back to the dealer for high margin service. Yeah, they run a store. Most of the big dealers have a store that sell you branded options and maybe a few upgrades. My Dodge, I can buy Dodge branded footsteps to get into the truck. I can buy, mud flaps and things like that. But Tesla's really figured this electronics out, and I think it's brilliant. It's upgradable electronics remotely. And by the way, it just shows up on your car. You order it through your Tesla account, shows up in your car, and you can actually pull up a screen that shows you all your options and which options you don't have. And so obviously everything's there for the option. One of their biggest one was the performance option. I believe that option cost more than $20,000, high performance option. And they only had to enable it electronically. So you could decide today, gee, I'd like the option. I have the money. You'll get it today. Fantastic. I really think that those guys have got it. And the margin on that has got to be clear, almost 100%, right? They've already invested and sold you the car. The only thing they're giving you is electronics. It's like the Lexus my wife owns. So we go in to upgrade the GPS. And I think that upgrade is $340, $400. Don't quote me exactly, but I know it's fairly pricey. They put in a USB module on there, upgrade this in about 5 to 10 minutes with a new map software, right? And I do this every couple years or so, and charge me almost $400. The margin is, the $5 for the USB stick, and they don't give me the USB stick. I assume they reuse it. I don't know how Lexus controls the license for that. Maybe they don't reuse it and they have to throw that away. Maybe it's one-time use. That's probably the way I would design that. So this is very similar to something a company I worked for one time. We actually sold excess storage. In the storage business, you'd find that customers come back to you 6 months later and want more storage. They just couldn't get enough of storage. And so back then we called it forklift storage. So you'd actually come in and take out these refrigerator size pieces of computer equipment and put new ones in to get them more storage. And you had to do that on a weekend when they weren't running critical applications. So it required a lot of planning and a lot of freight and freight docks and movement and, engineers earning double pay on a weekend. So finally somebody came up with a great idea. Why don't we sell them, give them excess storage in their unit and tell them with a phone call, we can enable this and just charge them more money. And what a great idea. It worked very well. So the auto industry, I think, could have learned this early on. They've got this common interface now that everybody uses. Insurance companies actually got to use that port first before anybody else did. Right? The auto companies used it for maintenance reasons. They wanted a common maintenance interface, and we had the same problem in the computer industry that we worked hard on. So they don't want a lot of hardware riding around with each car just to figure out what's wrong with it. So they plug in, $1 million maintenance machine to each car, and then they can tell what's going on with the car. And so now the insurance company said, hey, we can figure out if they're making quick stops, how many miles a day they're driving, and so on. And they've made a huge industry out of that and lowered insurance premiums for lots of people who drove very carefully. So auto industry has figured out a few of these. The Wi-Fi options that you pay every month, obviously they make an annuity income off that. The alarms, the monitoring, theft monitoring, accident monitoring, right, and so on. You can push a button and ask to speak to somebody. I think most cars have those options now, upgrade. So auto industry has been slow to come around to this, but they have. But it's great, annuity income that you can get that's high margin, they ought to be working for. So I think the one I would say they ought to work on. So on my Dodge truck, and I think this is common with lots of vehicles now, that the acceleration, the throttle is by electronic. It's not by cable anymore. Used to, you'd have a direct cable between your accelerator pedal and the carburetor, or the fuel injection. So whatever you did with the, how fast you hit the accelerator translated into an immediate response to the engine. Well, they've taken that away now. And so now that they've got, and it's called throttle by cable, right? And different names but it's electronic throttle. It's instead of throttle by cable, it's electronic. And so they've delayed that to drive up mileage, the mileage ratings for EPA rate. So you can buy add-on kits now for $300. I think for my Dodge pickup, dramatically improves acceleration if that's what you want, and it fixes that response time. Instead of muting that throttle response time, it takes it back to natural response time. Why didn't Dodge have that as a remote option that I could just on a moment's notice decide, because now if I order this, I have to wait for it to come in. I have to go out to the car and try to figure out how to plug it in myself. I think it's fairly easy to do, but lots of people wouldn't do that. If it required no skill whatsoever, it's easier for me to request that option and have it done today, and I'd have it to go and drive today and enjoy it. So I think more and more companies are going to look at these annuity options where they can drive revenue after the initial sale and have add-on revenue that's over and above the maintenance option that they normally they lived on. Maybe we could have that for appliances. There's other devices that maybe we could have that. Second article. Gene edits, the genetic edits that they're doing with programs. You may have heard a program called CRISPR, 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 that allows scientists to do gene edits. they're now creating flaws. And this is a problem that people warned about, but scientists ran headlong into this, saying the upside is so great, maybe we can deal with this and get by without having any flaws. But they're finding out the flaws are huge. So this CRISPR program allows them to cut, edit, or even insert DNA into embryos. And what they found was they were working on a hereditary blindness problem where they could repair the gene. And so they repaired the gene and then found out that they had unintended and unwanted changes that happened. And so the problem with that, the real problem with that is once that person has that modified gene, remember, you have multiple generations after that person, so that problem starts becoming promulgated into multiple generations. And what's the effect of that long term? We still don't know, but this one is a clear warning to the scientific industry, scientific area that says be very careful. So I think we're starting to see some of the first flaws from these gene edits. So article number 3. This is interesting. I hadn't seen this before. So in the old days, voting time, we would talk about straight tickets. I don't hear that that discussion much anymore. In fact, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we used to be able to, on voting machines, vote a straight Democratic or Republican or XYZ ticket when I was young. I mean, when I probably wasn't voting and my parents were. And I didn't get a chance to research that, but it seemed like we used to be able to do that, and it was a lot easier voting. These days, that's hard because you've got judges, you've got constitutional things. You've got citizen initiatives that you're voting on and stuff that aren't clear Democrat and Republican. So it's much more difficult. I think it'd be very hard to do that. But we used to vote straight tickets. So I was wondering how many people are really doing that anymore. Because when I grew up, people would say that I'm either a Democrat, Republican, and would never split a ticket. Never, never, never. Even though they thought if they were Republican, they thought the Democrat running was a better candidate, they wouldn't do it. And so now I think much more people are open to doing that. But some of the results coming in would imply that voters are not splitting the tickets. So if they're voting for Trump, they're voting for the Republican senator. And by the way, the correlation was senator to president who they're voting for. So that was the test they did, not down to Congress. So there are only two ones that are kind of an outlier right now, and I kind of understand it because I live in Arizona, but Arizona and North Carolina, the senators are lagging the president in both of those states. And so I thought that was kind of interesting observation about the election, that I thought we've come a long way from the straight ticket type voting, and it appears like we haven't come that far. It's all about ideology, and you think the senator is going to carry that same ideology into Washington that you think the president is, and that's what you want. Article number 4, and let me grab a chart here for you. So no stimulus, no problem. So it now looks like we have a V-shaped recovery. You can see that the GDP recovery here has been dramatic in third quarter. Up 33% in the third quarter, and you can see it's clearly a V-shape there, coming back up to be closer to what it was before the pandemic. So, and by the way, what's unique about this, and we need to discuss, is that third quarter was done without government stimulus. Remember, they fought the whole quarter about whether they could give us $1,200 checks or the $600 a month unemployment assistance. And it didn't happen. And remember, there was dire warnings from both parties, but primarily the Democrats, that said, if you don't get this done, you're going to crash our economy. And the fact of the matter is, the economy did really well without government stimulus. And makes you think about that first piece of stimulus. Was it necessary? Could we have still done a V-shaped recovery without it? I don't know. We'll never know, right? By the way, the personal savings rate still at 15.8%, very healthy. So lots of consumers have money that they can spend and may spend it yet. Maybe they're still restrained a bit based on the coming back of the pandemic and the more positive cases recently. So, and also the observation that the states with the stricter lockdowns have slower recovery right now, and that makes sense to me. Whatever reason they're doing it for, they've got slower recovery right now, and that's it's visible in the numbers and the GDP numbers coming from those states. So no stimulus, no problem. No, I mean, the good news is, I think if a Democrat does win, I think they're going to be taking over an economy that's coming out of the pandemic fairly well, depending on what happens with the pandemic and the cycles it takes. If it takes a turn like it's doing in Europe right now, that may change things. Or if the new Democratic administration or Congress or Senate decides to do strict lockdowns, and then that certainly would have an effect on the economy. Number 5, the surprise of the Supreme Court battles. The Barrett battle wasn't a battle at all. And it's interesting with this observation. If you watch the Supreme Court hearings, they weren't battling Mrs. Barrett. And why not? Well, Trump gave him a few problems here, and of course, and the Republican Party gave him a few problems too. But I listed 3 here from the articles. First of all, she's a woman, so that took away all the sexual issues that came up before, and I'll talk a little bit about that before, the sexual accusations came up before. So that took all that away, and they got to be very careful because of the Democrats, using identity groups. Actually, woman is a protected identity group, and they have to be careful of that. So that took away that. The speed is another thing. So nomination to confirmation took 30 days. Maybe this sets a new standard for Supreme Court justice confirmation, and I hope it does. It shouldn't take that long. A month, you ought to be able to put everything on the table, ask your questions, and have a yes or no vote. Let's get off with this, 3-month, 4-month confirmation cycles. By the way, Kavanaugh's, remember, the accusations about him came in 3 weeks into the confirmation cycle, and they sat on it for 6 weeks. So remember, those accusations came in 9 weeks into that cycle. So in this case, they're already done before that. So in 30 days, completely done. So speed of the confirmation, we could argue that the upcoming election drove that, but certainly Republicans did a fantastic job in keeping together, all of their members to drive that to completion. And so the other issue is the religious issue, Catholic. And by the way, not only Catholic, she was part of a subgroup of evangelical Catholics, I guess we could call them, that people had some issues with, but they had already had experience with her last time. Remember the dogma lives loudly within you comment. So they had a problem with her on the last time around, and that cost Democrats a lot. And they had to be very careful and step around that religious issue very carefully. And obviously, they're putting up a Catholic president this year. I don't know the religious preference of Kamala. That's interesting. It's skipped past me. I guess I haven't cared too much. Maybe something about that. So they had an issue with this Catholic last time, so they didn't take that. There was a few questions around that, but very little. So mainly, if you watch the hearings, they used it to instead promote the platforms and make it an election issue to say, look, here's our platform issues: Obamacare, abortion, and so on. And I think that's primarily the two that kept coming back and forth, and they kept accusing, obviously, of saying this would put those at risk. And so, but it's all said and done. She's seated. It's done. No more issue on that. So a quick one today. Just 5 articles that I picked up, but I hope you found it interesting and enjoyed having you with me today. You have a great weekend. Hope to see you Saturday for a quick update, and have a great weekend. Enjoy your weekend. Cheers.